Hi and welcome to my channel. If you are new to this channel, I'm Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm. In today's video, I'm going to show you 10 large classic books that I want to read. I sort of like the thought of classic books because you have a historical context, you can put modern literature in. Also, there are common references in classical literature. By reading classic books, you get an insight in what the world was like before, what has changed, and what is still in the present. The first criteria for this list today is that the page count of the books have to be over 500, and many of you would say that that's too little, and many of you would say that that's too much. I tried googling what is actually classic books, but that seems like an impossible thing to define. So for this video, I've actually chosen books that have been published before 1945. And that is because I saw many people talking about 1945 as a sort of common year to end classic literature. So let's dig in. The first book I have here with me, it's actually this and this and this. It's War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. It was published in 1865. The page count is around 1300 pages. Extremely ugly cover, but I think the content is good. Of course, Leo Tolstoy does not need an introduction. He is known as one of the greatest Russian authors. Of course, Russia is a very interesting country and with a rich and interesting history. And these books tell the story of when Napoleon tries to invade Russia, thus War and Peace. There are a lot of characters where you have the narrative of many different people, but it is said that the characters are easily tied together quite quickly. So that makes me think that this is not that complicated to read, even though I do fear many characters in books. So the book is set in a very interesting era in Russia. It has a lot of people that has a lot of different stories to them. And the book is supposed to give you a very thorough look into Russia at that time and the people who lived there. If this book actually is as good as many people would have it, then I'm in for a treat, because 1400 pages is quite a lot for me. Next on the list we have Ulysses by James Joyce, released in 1922, and it's around 1800 pages. Also bought at the flea market. The funny thing about this book, this in particular, is that it comes with its own money. And for those who are not very steady in Norwegian currency, this is not a lot. This book is actually a standing joke in my household, because before I started reading books, I always wanted to read this book and always tried to start this book. And each time I'm trying to decide on a new book, someone in my household asked me, why don't you read Ulysses? Still haven't read it. I would say that there's no logical reason for me to read this book, because the plot is supposed to be very difficult. In general, the book is supposed to be very hard to follow. Loosely based on the Odyssey, this landmark of literature follows ordinary Dubliners in 1904, capturing a single day in the life of a Dubliner. So that gives me some kind of hope, because if it's just one person one day, I sort of think that I have to get by. I can't really explain why I want to read this book, because when I'm looking through the book, it has no page count. That alone is quite frustrating and weird. And then we have The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is written by Victor Hugo and released in 1831, and it's about 500 pages. So this is the book I really think I would enjoy, because I actually like the Disney movie, even though I see critics of that movie that also have read the book is butchering the movie, but I was young, so I'm excused maybe. It's a long time since I've seen the movie. I thought it had very many action-filled elements and a quite gripping story. The story, of course, is about the hunchback who lives in the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and is not allowed to go outside the cathedral. And the book has a lot of universal themes like love and compassion and hate, all sorts of good things. The book takes place in medieval times, which is also a very interesting period in the world, which I associate with quite gruesome things. That also makes it quite interesting. Next we have Middlemarch, a study of provincial life by George Eliot. The book was published in 1871 and it's around 900 pages. George Eliot is actually Mary Ann Evans, and I presume that it's because of her gender that she took the name George Eliot and released the books with that name. The author is supposed to be quite special for the time because she worked as a co-editor for a magazine, so that's pretty special for being the time it was. I fell in love with the title of this book. I thought Middlemarch sounded very beautiful. An analysis of the life of an English provincial town during the time of social unrest prior to the Reform Bill in 1832, told through the lives of Dorothea Brooke and Dr. Tertius Ludgate. This title includes a host of other paradigm characters who illuminate the condition of English life in the mid-19th century. So the story is actually from when the author grew up and that time period where many things happened in English society. I hope this book is quite descriptive in terms of politics and how that affected the society they lived in. Of course, 900 pages is quite a commitment, and many people would say that this book deserves more pages, and many people would say it doesn't. Either way, the Anglophile part of me will like this book, I think. The next one on the list is sort of an interesting book to me. It's The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, released in 1844, and has a page count of around 12 to 1300 pages. And the reason I say it's quite interesting to me is because I've actually read the book, and I read the book before I actually started reading books. So this was one of the books I read, and that was the only book I read that year. And as some of you might have noticed already, I do not have huge hands. And this book is not 1200 pages, it is around 450. And that's the reason why I have to read this again. Because I really loved this book. I think it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. I sort of miss over half of the story, I feel now. Unless the 1200 pages has a lot of pictures in them. So of course the Count of Monte Cristo tells the story of revenge. That might be the reason I love it. So the story is fantastic and told in what I would describe as not a very classic way, because it's always things happening. It's very fast paced, and one thing I got out of this book besides the great story is that I now know what an abridged version is. The next book is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, released in 1861 and it's around 500 pages. Great Expectations is the book I think of when I think about Charles Dickens. Great Expectations follows the childhood and young adult years of Pip, a blacksmith's apprentice in a country village. He suddenly comes into a large fortune from a mysterious benefactor and moves to London, where he enters high society. He thinks he knows where the money has come from, but he turns out to be sadly mistaken. So this seems like a very interesting plot to me, and it has already gotten me to think about where has the money come from. Is it the book that I most want to read of these? No. But maybe it's the one on the list I feel like I have to read. And here comes the Anglophile part of me again. It's the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Did I say that correctly? So this is a collection of 24 tales from the 14th century. I've seen many people talk about Geoffrey as the father of English literature, wrote in Middle English, while Latin was the language that was written at the time. I can't say anything else that I really wanted to read something that was very old. Also, it being many different tales, you could do it chunk by chunk, so I could pick the book up and lay it down many times. Then we have the Black Book. It's Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre. Of course, a very famous classic, also filmatized about 1,000 times, released in 1847, and this edition being around 500 pages. It's Charlotte's debut novel. The book is about orphaned Jane, who struggles to survive and struggles her way up in society, and I think that is what got me, because I really love the books about struggle, humans that go beyond their capacity, or people that uses their capacity to make life better for themselves. I think that makes for an interesting plot. Last on the list we have Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, released in 1832. The one I'm looking at has around 500, that one as well. I actually saw this as an opera, and I did not really understand anything from it, but I really enjoyed it anyway. And that day I decided that I should read the book or the play. Faust is bored and depressed with his life as a scholar. After an attempt to take his own life, he calls on the devil for further knowledge and magic powers, in which to indulge all the pleasure and knowledge of the world. In response, the devil's representative, Mephistopheles, appears. He makes a bargain with Faust. Mephistopheles will serve Faust with his magic powers for a set number of years. But at the end of the term, the devil will claim Faust's soul, and Faust will be eternally enslaved. I don't think you will get a more classic tragedy than this, so this might not be the original tragedy, but it's old enough. And I really don't have any other thoughts behind it than that. I realize now that this might not be 10 books, but only 9. Yeah, it's 9. At some point I think I removed Moby Dick, because do I really want to read that book? I guess I landed on no. But the future will tell also which one of these books I've read. Thank you for watching this video. If you have comments for which other classic big books I would have to read, comment below. If you like the content, please subscribe to my channel. I would be very happy. And I'll see you next time. Bye! Mephistopheles.